My friend stole my crush, bragging, he'd never look at you twice. So I waited until she called me crying for advice. I gave her the same line she used on me, then picked him up from the airport myself. I'm Maya, 28 years old, female, and my hands are shaking as I type because this starts with something stupid, a paper crane. I folded it the first night I met Ethan, 30 years old, male, because I didn't know what to do with my hands while he told a story about missing a flight in Denver and sleeping under a gate bench. I tucked the crane into my pocket and walked home with that warm, bright ache you get when a stranger says your name like they've said it before. I put the crane on my dresser next to my chipped thrift store mirror, and it's been gathering dust ever since, like a tiny receipt for a feeling I never cashed in. Then there's Sloane, 29 years old, female, my best friend since freshman orientation in Austin, the girl who once slipped me her sweater after a coffee spill and said, "We're not saving face, we're building one." She walked like she owned the floor under her feet. When Sloane loved you, she made you taller. When she didn't, she could unmake you with a single LOL. She's always been big. Big fur-lined coat in August. Big opinions. Mint ice cream as toothpaste. Big gestures. Once she swapped out my busted wiper blades without telling me and left a post-it with a drawn heart and a lipstick kiss. I felt claimed. We were a package deal. Sloane and Maya, matching tattoos, lightning bolts on our ankles, mutual calendars, late-night Target runs, shared Uber rides home when one of us drank too much and the other pretended not to mind. There were cracks I didn't see until they were already spiderwebbing under the paint. Her borrowing my black dress and never returning it, telling the story of my bad breakup to people I barely knew because it made for a better laugh at parties. "I'm hyping you up," she'd say, while my chest went tight and tiny. Enter Ethan. Soft-mouthed smile, plain-winged shoulders, the kind of attention that sits quietly in the corner and watches everything, sure of what it wants but not loud about it. He's friends with my coworker, showed up to trivia one Tuesday in a faded band tee, and asked me about the book in my bag. He listened. He actually asked follow-ups. He laughed at the exact right beats, not like he was performing laughter, but like the mood was a tide and he was letting it pull him in. Sloane clocked him instantly. On the way home, we shared fries in the Uber, and I told her in a whisper I hated how much I wanted him to text me. She watched me in the reflection of the window, the city skimming by in mobile goldfish flashes. "Just be normal," she said, squeezing my knee. "You're hot when you aren't trying." 2 days later, she FaceTimed me in her bathrobe, eyeliner purposefully smudged, that breathy Maryland voice she puts on when she's aiming a target. "I ran into Ethan at Moon Tower," she said, like she'd stumbled into a grocery aisle, not mapped a route. "He's funny, unexpected." I felt the ground tip. "Oh, did you tell him I—" "Maya," she cut in, tilting her head, glossy mouth working around pity. "He'd never look at you twice." It slid in so clean I didn't even bleed at first. Then later, I found the paper crane on the dresser and crushed it flat. Sloane didn't waste time. The very next week she was posting photos of her and Ethan on Instagram, matching cocktails, his hand on her thigh, her caption something nauseating like, "When you know, you know." I wanted to throw up. This wasn't some stranger stealing my crush. This was my best friend parading him like a trophy she'd wrestled out of my hands. What made it worse was how performative it all felt. Ethan didn't seem like the guy to show off on social media, but there he was in filtered selfies, tagged at every bar she dragged him to. I told myself he was probably oblivious, that maybe he didn't know she'd known about my feelings for him. But every photo felt like a public reminder of that line she'd said to me. "He'd never look at you twice." It looped in my head at night until I couldn't sleep. And Sloane? She leaned into it. Every time we met for coffee, she dropped Ethan's name like punctuation. "Ethan loves that place. Ethan's so good at trivia." She made it sound casual, but it wasn't. It was deliberate, like she was carving the words into my skin to see how deep they'd go. Once she even laughed and said, "Honestly, Maya, you dodged a bullet. He's kind of boring when he talks about travel. You'd fall asleep." I swallowed every insult, every dig. I learned how to nod, how to smile like it didn't matter. But inside, I was cataloging everything. Her smugness, her carelessness. The way she turned Ethan into a prop the same way she'd turned my breakup stories into her stand-up material. The first real crack showed at a house party. Ethan and I ended up in the kitchen together while Sloan was outside smoking. He asked me about the book I'd been reading at trivia, the same one that started our first conversation. His voice was low, his eyes actually locked on mine, not flitting to the door or his phone. For a minute, it felt like the crane on my dresser was whole again. Then Sloan stumbled back in, hair wild, cheeks flushed, and saw us laughing. She dropped her drink, glass shattering across the tile, and screamed, "Are you kidding me? You're really going to try this right in front of me?" Everyone in the living room turned. Ethan froze. I stood there barefoot on the edge of broken glass, feeling her fury hit me like heat off an open oven. That's when I realized Sloan wasn't untouchable anymore. She was volatile, cracked, scared. And if I just stayed quiet long enough, she'd hand me the weapon to use against her. Don't forget to subscribe. Sloane's meltdown at that party was only the beginning. After the glass hit the tile, after everyone had gasped and the music dipped for a beat, she tried to play it off like a joke, laughing too loudly, waving her arms like it was just so crazy that her clumsy self had struck again. But her eyes weren't laughing. They were locked on me, sharp and cutting. I cleaned up the glass because no one else moved, barefoot, shaking, kneeling on the floor while Sloane strutted back to Ethan and draped herself on him like she'd just won a prize she thought I was trying to steal. Ethan kept glancing at me, guilt flickering, but he didn't say anything. And I didn't either. I kept my mouth shut, because silence has a way of digging under people's skin more than yelling ever could. The fallout was immediate, though. The next morning, Sloane showed up at my apartment uninvited. She pounded on the door until I opened it, then shoved past me with sunglasses on and her hair pulled into a too-tight bun. She started in without even sitting down. "You embarrassed me last night." I just blinked at her. "You're the one who screamed. You were flirting with Ethan." Her voice cracked on his name. "In my face. Like some kind of desperate sidekick who thinks she's the main character now." Her words landed like punches. I could feel the heat in my chest, the old reflex to apologize, to smooth things over. But I didn't. I just stood there, letting her unravel. That's when she snapped. She grabbed the photo on my entryway table, a picture of me and her from our sophomore year, arms slung around each other, sunburnt and smiling after a beach trip, and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered, spraying across the floor. "You don't get to rewrite this story," she hissed. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them against my thighs. But somewhere under the adrenaline, there was this weird calm. Like I could already see where this was going, and I knew all I had to do was wait. Because here's the thing about Sloane. She's never been able to handle cracks in her image. Every meltdown has to be swept up fast, painted over, spun into a performance. And I realized she was going to do that with Ethan, too. The same pattern she'd pulled on me 100 times. Turn him into her spotlight, then torch him when he stopped clapping. I just needed to bide my time. That night, I picked the flattened paper crane out of the trash and smoothed it as best I could. The creases were permanent, the wings never sat right again, but it still looked like a crane. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel pathetic keeping it. I felt patient. Ethan started noticing the cracks. That much was obvious. At trivia the following week, he showed up alone. No Sloane on his arm, no theatrical entrance. Just him, sliding into the seat across from me with a quiet, almost relieved smile. "She bailed last minute," he said, shrugging, though the tension in his shoulders gave him away. "Said she wasn't feeling it." I nodded, keeping my face neutral while my heart banged against my ribs. The whole night, we laughed like we had that first time. Genuine, unforced, easy. For 2 hours, I got to feel like myself again, not Sloane's shadow. But of course, she couldn't leave it at that. The next morning, my phone blew up. Missed calls, texts, even a voice note from Sloane, her voice hoarse and raw. "So you think you're slick? Sitting there with Ethan like I wouldn't hear about it? You think I don't know what you're doing? God, Maya, you're pathetic." I didn't respond. And that silence must have shredded her nerves because the escalation was fast. That afternoon, when I got home from work, there were footprints in the thin layer of dust on my balcony. My balcony, 3rd floor. She'd climbed up the fire escape to snoop, left the sliding door jimmied an inch open. Nothing was missing, but my dresser drawers were rifled through, and the paper crane, the one I'd smoothed out, was gone. I sat on my bed staring at the empty space where it had been, adrenaline shaking my hands. Sloane had invaded my space, stolen something she knew mattered. It wasn't about theft, it was about control. A reminder that she still could. That night, she posted a photo of the crane on her Instagram story. No caption, just her manicured hand holding it between two fingers, crumpling the wings. My stomach turned, but I didn't reply. Didn't give her the satisfaction. 2 days later, she called me crying. Not the fake, performative sniffles I'd learned to spot years ago. Real, panicked sobs that cracked her words apart. Maya, please. I don't know what to do. Ethan's pulling away. He won't answer me. He says I'm too much. Can you believe that? He says I smother him. He doesn't understand. You always know what to say. Just tell me what to do to fix it. I pressed the phone tight to my ear, and for a long second I said nothing. Just let her desperation echo. Then, very softly, I gave her back the line she once gutted me with. He'd never look at you twice. The silence on her end was sharp, like a glass cracking under pressure. She made this wounded noise, half gasp, half scream, and hung up. And I just sat there in the dark, phone still warm in my hand, my heart steady for the first time in months. Because the difference between Sloane and me was simple. I knew how to wait. Don't forget to subscribe. Update. 1. Hey everyone. Wow. I didn't expect the response I got on my last post. I thought maybe a handful of people would read about Sloane, 29, female, and Ethan, 30, male, and shrug. But instead, my inbox is packed with DMs ranging from "girl, burn her entire wardrobe" to "you need to cut both of them off forever." Some of y'all are savage. I actually spit out my coffee reading the one that suggested mailing Sloane a new paper crane every week until she cracked. Tempting. A lot of you said the same thing, though, that I need to stop letting her control the narrative. And honestly, that hit me hard because for so long I've been the quiet friend, the one who smooths things over. I didn't even realize how much I'd bent myself around her chaos until I read comments like, "Maya, she's not your friend, she's your warden." That one cut deep. So here's what's happened since. After I told her he'd never look at you twice. Yep, I said it exactly the way she once said it to me. Sloane absolutely lost it. Like full meltdown. She's been blowing up my phone with alternating rage and begging. First it was, "How could you betray me?" Then, 5 minutes later, "You're right, I'm spiraling, please help me." Then back to rage. It's exhausting to even glance at my notifications. And Ethan? He texted me yesterday. Just one line. "Are you free next week? I land Wednesday." No emojis, no small talk. Just that. And my stomach flipped because Sloane doesn't know he reached out to me directly. Which makes this deliciously messy, doesn't it? Because I've been sitting here replaying that night she threw our old photo frame at my wall, screaming that I'd never be the main character. And now she's unraveling, begging me to fix her relationship, while Ethan's looking to me instead. I know a lot of you want me to torch her immediately, but here's the thing, I'm not rushing. Sloane always crashes fast and loud. Me? I like precision. I like timing. And I've got something in mind that's going to be sweeter than any Instagram caption she's ever written. Let's just say, airports are loud, public, and impossible to spin when someone's waiting for you at the gate. Stay tuned. Sloane's spiral only accelerated after my last call with her. She couldn't sit still in silence, not when she felt the ground slipping. The next week was a barrage. Middle-of-the-night voicemails, dramatic Instagram stories with half-lit selfies captioned, "Loyalty is dead," even a cryptic tweet tagging Ethan's handle with broken heart emojis. And then came the stunt. I woke up one morning to find my car keyed from headlight to taillight. One long, jagged scar down the side. At first, I thought it was random vandalism, city life, bad luck. But tucked under my windshield wiper was a sticky note in her handwriting. Just 2 words. Stay small. My chest went ice cold. She wasn't subtle anymore. This was territory violation, escalation, all of it. I didn't call the cops. Sloane was slippery, and she'd spin it into me being dramatic or vindictive. Instead, I documented it, took photos, filed it away, because she didn't realize I was done being on defense. Meanwhile, Ethan and I had been talking. Texts mostly, little things. He'd ask what book I was reading. I'd send a photo of the crane folded back together as best I could. His replies were short but warm, like he didn't want to spell things out over a phone line Sloan might still monitor. Then came the message that shifted everything. Flight gets in Wednesday, 8:10 p.m. Don't tell Sloan, I just want to see you. I stared at it for so long my phone screen dimmed and went black. Because here was the thing. Sloan was already planning her grand gesture. She'd posted a photo of balloons in her apartment with the caption, "Counting down days until my love is back where he belongs." The performance was already rehearsed, the champagne already chilled. But Ethan wasn't landing into her arms. He was landing into mine. That Wednesday, I parked in the arrivals lot, stomach flipping so hard I thought I might actually throw up. The terminal smelled like coffee and floor polish, announcements echoing overhead. And then I saw him, backpack slung over one shoulder, scanning the crowd until his eyes landed on me. The way his face softened. I'll never forget it. Relief, recognition, something deeper I'd only ever let myself imagine before. He walked straight to me, no hesitation, and pulled me into the kind of hug that doesn't leave room for air. "Thanks for coming," he said into my hair, and while I held on to him, I couldn't help but picture Sloan back at her apartment, refreshing her phone, rehearsing her smile in the mirror, not realizing that for once, the story wasn't going to revolve around her. It was already too late. Don't forget to subscribe. Ethan and I didn't even make it back to my place that first night. We sat in the airport parking lot for hours, windows cracked, the smell of jet fuel drifting in on the breeze while we just talked. Not surface-level stuff either, real, jagged things. He admitted he felt smothered by Sloan, how every conversation had turned into a performance for her audience. How she'd cut me down in front of him once, saying I was too meek to keep up, and he hated how easily I'd smiled through it. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" he asked, his voice rough. Because I was tired of being told I was dramatic. Because Sloane's voice had been louder than mine for a decade. Because part of me thought he'd choose her no matter what. I didn't say all of that. I just shrugged, and he nodded like he understood anyway. By the time he drove me home, dawn was pressing at the horizon. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. But Sloan didn't stay quiet for long. She showed up at my apartment 2 days later, pounding on the door so hard my neighbors peeked out into the hall. Her hair was tangled, her mascara smudged down her cheeks like war paint. She was screaming Ethan's name before I even opened the door. "Where is he, Maya?" Her voice cracked, feral. "He landed 2 days ago. I know he did. So why hasn't he called me? Why are you so smug, huh? Did you poison him against me?" I stood in the doorway, keeping my hand braced on the frame. "Maybe he just saw through you." That set her off. She shoved past me, storming through my living room, knocking over a lamp as she searched like she expected Ethan to be hiding in my closet. My pulse was hammering, but I forced myself to stay still. "You don't get it," she sobbed, grabbing one of my throw pillows and hurling it against the wall. "He's mine. He was supposed to fix everything. You're just—" She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "A placeholder. You've always been a placeholder." Her words landed sharp, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, held it up so the red recording light glowed between us. "Keep going, Sloan," I said softly. "You're doing great." Her face crumpled. She lunged forward like she might slap the phone from my hand, but then she froze. Suddenly aware of the audience she couldn't control. Her breathing came ragged, tears streaking through the smeared mascara. And then she bolted. Out the door, down the hall, leaving chaos in her wake. I stood in the wreckage of my apartment, heart still racing, but for once not with fear, with certainty. She'd just given me all the ammo I needed. Update 2. Hey, it's me again. Honestly, I didn't expect to be back this soon, but after what just went down, I feel like my chest is going to split open if I don't get this out. So, remember how a bunch of you warned me Sloan, 29, female, wouldn't take losing control lightly? Yeah, you were right. I thought the car keying was bad. I thought the Instagram crane stunt was her rock bottom. Nope. She came to my apartment, screaming, crying, tearing through my stuff like she was on some kind of reality TV breakdown reel. My neighbors probably think I'm harboring a fugitive. And here's the kicker. Y'all told me to document everything. One comment literally said, "Next time she storms in, hit record and let her bury herself." Guess what? I did. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and just let her rant about Ethan being hers and me being a placeholder. Her face when she realized that little red dot was on? Priceless. She went pale, choked on her words, then bolted like the walls were closing in. Some of you also said something that stuck with me. Sloane's always been the star of her own show. Don't fight her for the spotlight. Just cut the stage lights and let her implode. And holy hell, that's exactly what's happening. Because while she's spiraling, Ethan's been reaching out more. We've been talking late into the night, and it feels like the version of him I first met. The one who noticed the book in my bag, the one who laughed at my dumb origami crane, is resurfacing. And yes, before anyone asks, I did pick him up from the airport. That moment? Worth every sting from Sloane's words, every scar she tried to carve into me. It felt vindicating. I won't lie, though. Part of me still feels guilty. Old habits die hard. I spent years smoothing her chaos, being the buffer, telling myself she didn't mean it. Now I'm standing in the wreckage she left in my apartment, holding my phone with all her screaming saved in neat little files, and I feel this weird mix of grief and relief. But the guilt doesn't outweigh the satisfaction. Not anymore. So what now? I don't know. I'm not plotting fireworks or grand gestures. I'm just letting her drown in the silence she can't stand. Ethan's choosing me without me twisting myself into knots. And Sloane? She's unraveling without an audience to clap for her. One of you commented, "Revenge is sweetest when you don't even have to lift a finger. Just open the door and let the storm blow itself out." I think that's exactly what's happening. And God, it's beautiful. Don't forget to subscribe. It didn't take long for Sloane to figure it out. Ethan and I had been careful. No photos, no posts, just quiet nights talking in my kitchen or walking around the lake near my apartment. But Sloane was always watching, always waiting for cracks in the story she could exploit. And sure enough, she spotted us. It was a Saturday afternoon at a coffee shop. Ethan and I were sitting at a corner table, heads leaned together over a crossword puzzle, laughing at how bad we both were at the clues. It felt normal, safe. Then I saw the reflection in the glass. Sloane outside on the sidewalk, frozen mid-step, a to-go cup in one hand, her eyes wide and locked on us like a sniper's scope. I knew before she even pushed through the door that it was going to be ugly. "Maya," she hissed, loud enough that the whole cafe turned. "Are you kidding me? You couldn't even wait a week?" The room went silent. Ethan stood, calm but firm, and said, "Sloane, this isn't the place." But Sloane has never cared about places. She thrives on the spectacle. She stormed to our table, knocking over a chair, her voice rising until it cracked. "You stole him. After everything I've done for you, you think you get to just take what's mine?" People were staring, phones out, some pretending not to record while clearly recording. My stomach twisted, but I didn't move. For once, I let her burn. Ethan tried to de-escalate. "No one stole anyone, Sloane. I made my choice." That single line was gasoline. Her whole body jolted, and she slammed her coffee cup onto our table so hard the lid popped, scalding liquid spilling across our crossword puzzle and dripping onto the floor. "You'll regret this," she screamed, pointing at me, then at him. "Both of you, you'll regret humiliating me." The manager rushed over, asking her to leave. Sloane's voice cracked higher, hands shaking, as she shouted about betrayal, about loyalty, about how everyone always abandons her. And then, in one last flailing attempt to regain control, she grabbed the half-soggy crossword book, ripped it in half, and flung the pieces into the air like confetti. It was pathetic, heartbreaking almost, but also freeing. Because for the first time, I didn't feel small under her storm. I felt taller, grounded. Ethan reached for my hand, steady and warm, while the manager escorted her out, her voice still echoing down the block. The cafe doors closed behind her, muffling her rage, and all that was left was silence, and a room full of strangers watching me with pity and maybe something like admiration. Sloane had wanted to humiliate me. Instead, she'd humiliated herself. And I didn't have to lift a finger. After the coffee shop meltdown, the fallout spread fast. That's the thing about public scenes. Once the phones come out, you don't control the story anymore. By Monday, clips of Sloane screaming were floating around our friend group's group chats, then onto acquaintances' feeds. Someone had even captioned it, "When your main character moment flops." Brutal, but accurate. Suddenly, the girl who once owned every room she walked into couldn't step foot in one without whispers trailing behind her. At trivia night, where she used to command the table, people avoided eye contact. At bars, friends made excuses to leave early. She'd built her world on attention, and now all eyes on her were laughing, not clapping. She texted me once more, a long, rambling message that swung from rage to desperation in the space of 3 paragraphs. "You don't understand, Maya. I needed him. You were supposed to have my back. You're my best friend. Why would you do this to me?" I didn't respond. Not out of malice, but because I finally understood. Nothing I said would ever be enough. She wanted loyalty without giving any. She wanted me small so she could stay big. Ethan and I didn't make some grand declaration. We didn't post a photo or rub salt in her wounds. Instead, one night he came over with takeout, and while we were unpacking the bags, he pulled something from his pocket. The paper crane. My crane. The one she'd stolen and crumpled for her little power play. He'd found it shoved in the back pocket of his duffel, creased and bent, but still intact. "I think this was yours," he said softly, handing it back. I smoothed the wings, my fingers tracing the folds I'd made that first night we met. It was battered, scarred, but still a crane. Still mine. I set it on the dresser, right where it had always been. Only this time, it didn't feel like a dusty relic of something I'd lost. It felt like proof that some things survive, even when people try to break them. Sloane's world dimmed after that. I'd see glimpses, her social media accounts going private, mutual friends dropping her name less and less. She tried to claw her way back, I'm sure, but the stage lights had gone out, and there was no audience left to clap her lines back to life. As for me, I stopped being her shadow. I stopped being small. The crane sat on my dresser, wings crooked, creases permanent. And every morning it reminded me, broken doesn't mean worthless. It just means you survived. And that survival, in the end, was the sweetest revenge.